Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today and welcome to today's Tracker webinar, The Opportunities for Delivering Procurement Innovation in the Devolved Landscape. My name is Christian Doak from the Public Policy team at BIP Solutions, the company behind the Tracker service, and also the Local Government Procurement Expo, which was hosted just last week at the Novotel London West in Hammersmith on Tuesday, the 25th of November, and where today's guests were among the headline speakers. As ever, it's great to have all of you with us today. And for those of you who couldn't attend LGPE last week, then today presents another chance to catch up on a little bit from that day as we discuss the latest on local government procurement in England, including devolution and innovation in procurement activity. Later on, we will also be hearing from my colleague, Dawn McTaggart, who will be taking a closer look at the latest trends and developments in the local government market and explain how Tracker can help you make data-driven decisions to excel in this sector. Now, as devolution in England continues to gather pace, new bowers and funding settlements are reshaping how local authorities plan, buy and deliver public services. With more decision-making progressively being devolved to regions, procurement is playing an increasingly strategic role, not only in delivering value for money, but also in driving local innovation, supporting growth and addressing regional priorities. So with the help of Rikesh and Michael, we'll be examining how devolved authorities can use procurement as a lever for innovation and economic development, and discuss what suppliers need to know about engaging effectively with combined authorities, regional procurement organisations, and local government partnerships. Rikesh Shah, Head of the Innovation Procurement Empowerment Centre at Connected Places Catapult, and Michael Murray, Commercial Manager at NEPO. Welcome to today's webinar, and thank you very much to both of you for joining us.
Christian.
Thank you. So to begin, I guess, we'll start with maybe yourself, Rikesh, and then we'll go on to Michael. But could you tell us a little bit, I suppose, us and the audience, about your current roles at Connected Places and at NEPO, respectively, and how what your organisations are currently doing at the moment in terms of supporting innovation in public procurement?
Yep, thanks, Christian, and thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to join you and Michael.
Thank you.
So I'm head of the Innovation Procurement Empowerment Centre. As you mentioned, it sits in the Connected Places Catapult, and it's the UK's Innovation Procurement Competency Centre. And what we try to do, like other European agencies, is really drive forward how you can use procurement as a driver to stimulate more innovation and create new value. So that's about doing things better, cheaper, quicker, greener. And we work with local authorities, regional bodies, and national government agencies. And primarily, we do 3 or 4 things. One is that word empowerment is critical here. We embed resources into local teams who are trying to use innovation or procurement to bring in innovation. So we work on cohort programs across the UK. We also do a lot of academic research. So we work with the University of Manchester and Birmingham to really build the evidence around innovation and procurement. We also grow communities. We have about 2,000 to 3,000 members on our LinkedIn channel. And we also have a series of communities in practice. And also we're working very closely on the policy side, which is building on the Procurement Act. How can we continuously use procurement as a policy tool to stimulate more innovation and create better value? So that's IPEC.
Thank you. And Michael?
Thanks, Christian, and really good to hear that, Rikesh. So Michael Murray, Northeast Procurement Organisation, and I'm the commercial manager there. The Northeast Procurement Organisation is a collaborative procurement function that sits over the top of the 12 Northeast authorities primarily, but we also operate national procurement frameworks up and down the UK. My role predominantly in that business is around focusing on the commercial drivers, the commercial strategy, and kind of where that business needs to go in the public landscape as well. We've really took a significant view around embedding innovation in what we're trying to achieve over the next few years. And that was really a big catalyst pushed along from the Procurement Act 23 and kind of the direction from government to really focus public authorities' minds and areas around innovation that can solve common problems for public authorities. So some of the work that we've been doing recently and actually working with Rikesh and some of the teams at IPEC around what Catapult does is to really focus on how we can embed innovation thinking and innovation approaches and outcomes to our future frameworks. We've got some really good, exciting stuff coming through, and I guess the Act has kind of triggered some of that push for us as an organisation and a collaborative procurement function in the public sector to really embed and embody some of that thinking and pushing it forward. So yeah, really, really exciting times in terms of some of the changes that you see nationally, and with the new regulations that are in place as well.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And thank you very much, both of you, for those introductions. And we'll be talking a lot more about innovation specifically over the course of this webinar. But the title of today's webinar revolves to the devolved landscape. And as we know, particularly in local authority procurement and local authorities generally, devolution and local government reorganisation is obviously a big backdrop to everything that's going on there. So are you able to briefly outline, Michael, what devolution in English local government is meaning or is going to mean for procurement activity, and why suppliers should be paying attention to these changes?
Yeah, absolutely, Christian. So I guess when we're thinking of devolution, and being based in the Northeast, we've seen a significant change in the last few years around the Northeast Combined Authority, or NECA, coming into play. We've seen this across the UK as well, with GMCA, West Midlands, and other combined authorities that have kind of took those devolution powers, the additional funding, and that transfer of focus and power to a more localized operation. Really, really significant changes that we see across collaboration across boundaries, really, which is quite interesting from a NEPO point of view, because, as you know, we act as a collaborative function across the 12 in the Northeast anyway. So NEPO really sees this working quite cohesively across the Northeast. And then we've got an additional layer now around the mayoral combined authority and how that organisation looks across boundaries to kind of tackle some of those significant localised place-based problems, and some of the strategic drivers around transport, education, social outcomes, and sort of citizen areas that have been looked at. And as we know, sort of over 50% of the population now across the UK is covered by one of those mayoral combined authorities. It gives more freedom in terms of design and procurement around local areas and local people, focusing on growth, net zero, innovation, as Rikesh has been looking at as well. And I guess procurement overall being really used as a strategic tool for economic development, and a strategic lever now, and not just commodity based or transactional. Let's say it's becoming a real strategic function across those combined authorities, and as a place based function to unlock some of the innovation that is needed.
And just if I may, just
of course,
share my reflection, which is, I was at Transport for London for quite a while, which you could argue, was a strategic authority. Well, it was a strategic authority for London when it came to transport. And just building on what Michael said, some of the benefits we saw firsthand was there was more consolidation taking place, because you get the economies of scale. Suddenly we weren't just procuring for a local authority, we're procuring for the whole of London, and perhaps you might merge bus contracts with tube contracts, with tram contracts. So certainly there's opportunity for value there. But that also means there was a significant change for the procurement folk, who are very used to working in a certain manner. Suddenly you're thinking more broadly. And I think for the supplier side, social value will become more relevant, because if you've got larger contracts, we've got a big emphasis now on social value in procurement. So how are you sort of focusing on creating new jobs? How are you focusing on upskilling? Perhaps some of the environmental benefits with those large tenders. I think there'll be more on SMEs, and we're certainly seeing more SME targets. So I think that'll be more of that coming through. But the other 2 points would be, the new Procurement Act talks about the pre-market engagement side of things. I think that becomes even more critical for suppliers to be doing than before, particularly if you're working with a strategic authority. And we're seeing more innovation clusters. The government's just recently announced the innovation funding at a local level, which means with the innovation funding and perhaps a supplier, there might be more of an opportunity to talk about art of the possible. And as a result, how can procurement be used to scale? So I totally agree with Michael. Just a couple of reflections from me at a local level at TfL.
No, absolutely. Thank you. And as you said, there's a huge amount going on, really, as far as all of that is concerned. You're talking about, so we're seeing combined authorities and regional partnerships gaining more autonomy now over spending decisions. So in addition to everything you talked about there earlier, do we also know, how else is this influencing the way that procurement is being planned and delivered across England, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. And really good points around Rikesh's time at TfL and kind of those merging of what would have potentially been siloed functions or different operations within different authorities, and coming together in a more holistic view, and that whole life sort of view of what's going on around a place. We see it now with some of the opportunities that are coming through the North East Combined Authority and others across the UK, where you've got much longer term thinking around procurement objectives that are trying to be achieved, and looking at that larger place-based commissioning approach, bringing together different functions that might not necessarily have always cohesively worked together. And as Rikesh pointed out, kind of creating new innovative solutions that kind of tackle those cross-border issues. And as we said, the size and scale and scope of some of this that's coming through from a supplier side anyway is going to be much more significant, much more longer term in terms of their thinking and their approach. And that, I guess, that early engagement with the likes of combined authorities or devolved powers that exist regionally should really, really be a priority for suppliers in terms of that, that new engagement, looking down the pipeline, seeing what's coming. And some of the Procurement Act's regulation changes have kind of enabled some of that, hopefully, with the new notices, the new pipeline obligations, and that market engagement being a real significant piece of focus, not only from a buyer's point of view, but also suppliers should get much better opportunities and much better chances to engage with authorities around what their future is looking like.
And just 3 quick points on this. I think one is, there should be more confidence to the market. And as Michael mentioned, the long-term element gives more confidence from the market to actually be able to bring new ideas in. Because what you don't want is just 6-month contracts or 12-month contracts. You want longer-term, larger contracts where you've got more opportunity to invest in innovation and R&D. So I think that's one. I think the other area is, I think procurement folk who'll be listening to this are brilliant, right? They've got a really difficult job. The conveyor belt is there just bringing new procurements in all the time. And as a result, we sometimes focus heavily on compliance. And what I would love to see is, as we go forward, especially with devolution, how can procurement become a more strategic function? How is it becoming an enabler on how budgets are being used, and perhaps how they could be used differently in the future by working differently with the market? So I think that's the second point. And I think the third point is, I think there will be changes around governance, because as we get bigger and the devolved authorities get bigger, the capability we will need, both at a strategic level and a delivery level, may also need to change. So I think there's some considerations there, particularly with devolution and some of the changes.
Of course, it's really important points you make there. And so, Rikesh, we can move on to, innovation more specifically. Through IPEC, you work closely with local authorities, among others, to embed innovation into their procurement processes. So what are some of the most effective approaches that you've seen in action recently?
Yeah, I think something on the IPEC side is, as I mentioned, we're a competency centre that focuses on sort of how do you use procurement to stimulate more innovation and create more value. And at local level, we're spending about £70 billion per annum on public procurement.
Indeed.
So it's not small. And we've got so many challenges, and this is something I talk about quite regularly, is we've got challenges around crime, we've got challenges around the built environment, we've got challenges around air quality, road safety, affordable housing, energy. We've got so many challenges, but also what we're seeing in parallel is new types of technology coming in that could potentially find new ways to deliver some of those problems or address those problems. And we talk about AI quite regularly, but there are so many use cases of AI now that the market's bringing in that could add value. And I think within, IPEC, we work closely with innovation clusters, across the UK. And we work, as I mentioned, with local, national, and regional bodies. And a lot of our area of emphasis is around outcome-based procurements. So how do we start with the problem based on evidence? And then how do you work your way through to solve that problem? So it's like you're looking ahead to say, what does good look like in 7 years? You're working back from there in the right order. I think that we do quite a lot around the pre-market engagement and horizon scanning, because we do believe with 317 local authorities, if everyone's doing their own horizon scanning around new technologies, that's a lot of effort. So how can we drive some economies of scale there? We're working with councils on joint challenges. So we've worked recently with Westminster, that was leading on the role of new technologies to address cooking oil and pollution challenges in London. We've also working currently with Somerset Council on coastal erosion. We've also worked with other councils on the adverse impact of freight, and then retrofitting housing and much more. We believe in iterative working. We don't just work behind the scenes and do that big unveiling. we believe if you're getting something wrong, tweak it and see if you can get it right. So how do you work with the market in that way? And that means new processes. It means new matrix teams. It means new conditions of success up front. How do you bring business planning at the beginning? How do you bring procurement at the beginning? How do you bring your technology folk at the beginning? What does a culture of experimentation mean in your local authority? How do you link that to business planning? And most importantly, how do you create a culture that's willing to take a bit more risk rather than immediately saying, what if that happens? And I think that's why the guardrails are in place, the experimentation zones are in place. So if you get something wrong, it protects you. So there's lots going on with IPEC and local authorities. And if there are local authorities listening to this, please approach us. You know, we're not for profit. We're funded through the UK government via Innovate UK. And we're always looking for new problem statements, which we can help you with. So please I'm sure our details will be published later.
Of course, thank you. Sorry, Michael, you just wanted to chip in?
Yeah, no, just to Rakesh's point, and this is actually something that we've gone through and actually took advice from Rikesh and the IPEC team is, I guess when you look at procurement and you think of innovation, sometimes those two things don't seem to go together when you think about risk and
Yes.
I guess compliance and all the things that we have to go through. But actually there is changes coming in the work that IPEC have done and delivered, as Rikesh pointed out there, for some of the local authorities. It is possible to have both things that work together cohesively. We've took a lot of learnings from some of the work that IPEC have done and the push from policy around thinking differently and trying to approach problem statements in a different way. And, whether that's looking at frameworks that would allow those type of, as you say, that try, test and fail, or, those pilots and then the scalability from that different stage. So I think there's a lot of good things that can be done. And I do think that public authorities, that when they see this, they see the case studies, they look at what's coming through from certain areas, will hopefully feel empowered to think differently, try some of these challenges in a different way, to tackle some of their more localized problems, or at least approach the procurement methods in a different way under the new act, the new flexibilities, and hopefully some of the frameworks that are coming down the line will allow that kind of supply ecosystem to try new things, to get in front of new technologies, and start small and look at what those solutions can deliver, and then look to scale that. So it is quite interesting seeing how innovation's weaving into policy now as well as just thinking. So yeah.
Of course, thank you. And I think it was a really important point that was raised earlier as well about the sort of the volume of challenges that local authorities have to deal with. I suppose it's the kind of thing we intuitively know, but when you hit it listed out like that, there's a huge amount that they have to work with, but obviously huge opportunities potentially in that sense for suppliers to contribute to. And continuing on, Michael, so NEPO has been obviously active, as we mentioned earlier, in regional collaboration for many years now. So how do you see devolution accelerate, potentially, at least accelerating opportunities for that within, areas like regional frameworks and indeed supplier engagement, which we touched on a little bit earlier?
Yeah, absolutely, Christian. I guess from a NEPO point of view, this is something that we've lived and breathed since the 70s, when NEPO was kind of born. It's something that certain regions and certain areas do really well, and we're seeing, I guess, a bigger push to the acceleration of the need for collaboration and the need for broader governance structures that also allow different stakeholders to come together and operate on much bigger scale problems. And I think Rikesh has got some great examples around transport, and that transport element's one of the priority focuses, or one of the first focuses for the Northeast and the Northeast Combined Authority. And we've seen this elsewhere with other combined authorities that have come together to unlock different regions, which then upskills the economy, provides new access to jobs, new types of investment that can come in, whether it's looking at brownfield spaces and kind of regen. So there's a whole host of different things that go on. I think one of the key things from a supplier point of view with this as well is think about the region that you're looking to work within and what those regional priorities may be. And they might be very similar across the UK when you think of net zero, digital, community and wealth, kind of the social value side of what you can deliver. And I think overall with devolution and the push to more localized powers, it's going to unlock longer term funding, more significant funding, which should de-risk some of the problems for suppliers if they're looking to invest. And then I guess when you're thinking of approaching those devolved authorities, make sure that you're aligning your operating model and your value proposition to what they need and what additional value can you bring beyond just a standard RFP or typical procurement approach. And I think that's really key, is to understand who you're looking to work with, what their long-term priorities are, and you can start aligning your business and your ecosystem and your supply chain to that.
Absolutely, thank you. And for suppliers, just continuing on that theme, so what are some of the main benefits and challenges, I suppose, of operating within a devolved procurement environment compared to what has been the case before with the various different authorities that make up any given region?
Yeah. Should I go?
Yeah, you go, Rikesh.
Either of you could go.
I think it builds on what Michael said. We've got an opportunity here to build really effective relationships at a decent level. So it's not extremely local, nor is it so regional or national. So I think it's the right size to really bring value in. And so I think the first tip is engage early with the right people. So develop your stakeholder map if you're a supplier, of who are all the different decision makers and who do you need to engage with. And then I think the most important thing I would say is, frankly, put your slide pack away, put your pitch deck away, and understand the problems that that region's facing. So Michael touched on some of the challenges that the Northeast will face. Well, who are they? What are the challenges that they're facing? Who do they affect? What's the role of the local authority, the regional body? And how can you talk their language? Because otherwise, if you bring your slide pack and you spend 20 minutes on the slides, you don't have enough time to understand the problem. And I think once you understand the problem, then come back with your slides and say, this is how I can help. But far too often it's done the other way. And then think about, how do you trial, how do you test, how do you prove your product, particularly if it's relatively new in the local region. And the other thing I would advise is start asking those questions, which we're quite shy to ask, is what's the route to scale? What budgets do you have? Who's the decision maker? You have absolutely every right. It's a two-way conversation and a value exchange to ask some of those questions, because otherwise the worst case scenario is you invest a lot of time, effort, both financially and resource wise, into a proof of concept that doesn't go anywhere. So there's some tips and advice from me.
Yeah, really good point, Rikesh, around that stakeholder mapping as well. I think one of the things we've seen from a regional collaboration and national collaboration actually is just the complexity of different stakeholders that you might be encountering. And as you said, knowing who you're dealing with and making sure that you're speaking to the right people at the right time. And as you say, looking at what problems they're trying to solve, and hopefully your business, your solutions could deliver some of that, and also work with your other supply partners in your area, because collaboration at the supply side as well, from consortiums to different models, is a great way of offering something new to an authority, and getting access to possibly different technology or solutions that may be on the cusp of what the public sector can get access to. So really good advice.
Of course, perfect. Thank you. And we've spoken obviously a lot by now on on the sort of benefits of early market engagement, and sort of on that same theme. What is, from a supplier perspective, what are some of the kind of best ways, do you think, for them to engage with combined authorities or innovation focused initiatives, whether that's through things like pilot projects, DPSs, or challenge based competitions? What do you think are some of the sort of best forms of engagement in that sense?
Should I go first?
Either of you.
I think pretty much hit the nail on the head around that early market engagement piece. And as you say, knowing the stakeholders you're dealing with, knowing who it is you're trying to work with, and that relationship thing's really key. I think it's really significantly important that suppliers are engaging very early with the right authorities and looking at their pipelines, because if I'm a PBO, and given a NEPO as an example, if we've got a long-term framework that's coming to its expiry and needs renewed, we might start that procurement activity as up to 2 years out from that framework end date. So already you're talking a 2-year engagement plan with potentially the private sector and different solutions at hand. So already you want to be planning 3 years ahead, 4 years ahead, really being on the front foot of what's coming down the line, and make yourselves aware to the combined authorities, to the devolved authorities as well. And that could be done through the pipeline notices. You'll see a lot more formal notices coming out now from a regulation point of view, which is great, in visibility and transparency. But also get into the region. There'll be a whole host of regional events that'll be going on, national events. Being in the room with actually in front of some of the buyers themselves and their teams can be so beneficial. And I think that's actually one of the great things we see around some of the national procurement events that such as LGPE is, you're in the room with the right people and having the right conversations, and it can feel very different than sending a cold email. So it's just
Indeed.
give yourself the opportunity to get in front of the right people is probably one of the main things for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think that early engagement's critical. I think one or two other points, especially in the innovation side, is check if the products are already available off the shelf. Is it genuinely innovative, or can you already use an existing route to market? And if you can, that becomes your way in. And I think the other point is thinking about what does good look like for you. And you define that right at the beginning, because sometimes you might just want to prove it and do a case study. Other times it might be a full end-to-end procurement. And I think really thinking about that right at the beginning is pretty important. Otherwise, you end up dancing around a little bit, and there's this awkward dance between the supplier and the private and the buyer. And I think you should be more direct, as I mentioned earlier.
Of course, thank you. That was really good advice from the pair of you. And I think, Rikesh, you touched on it a little bit earlier, but innovation was by default requires some level of risk-taking and flexibility, which can be difficult when you're talking about maintaining compliance in public procurement. So I think my next question is, how can buyers and suppliers best work together in that sense to balance that innovation with compliance and accountability and genuinely deliver that new sort of bold thinking, really, that can then be used in public services?
Yeah, I think innovation has to be treated very differently. And if you try and treat innovation the same way of you buying chairs or tables and other things, it could end up not working. And I think the first advice I would give, whether you're on the demand side or on the supply side, is what does shared value look like? It's inevitable if you're in the innovation space, things aren't going to go to plan. So what are you bringing in, and what does that partnership look like? So I think that's number one, and that needs to be done at a principal level, both commercially, but also operationally and technically. I think the second area is we want to make sure each party knows who's investing what, and you're doing that up front. So there isn't that, because as soon as you get excited by something innovative working, everyone throws lots of resources at it, and the commercial discussion then comes downstream, which gets a bit confusing. So be clear on who is investing what are the gains at the different stages. And then if new IP is being created, pause and work out who owns the foreground and the background IP, and then you work through it. And then finally, what happens post-trial? Are you procuring something? If you're going to sell it, if you're going to procure it yourself, but you're also going to sell it to other authorities, is there a gain share mechanism? And I think those commercial conversations and resource conversations have to be had up front. And that sometimes feels like it might slow the innovation down. But unless you've got the right innovation framework and the governance between the public and private entity, it could raise expectations inaccurately and then lead to disappointment for one, if not all parties.
No, that's really good advice. Thank you very much, Rikesh, for that. And I think, Michael, one of the elephants in the room, of course, all of this that we can't ignore, is that many local authorities are under varying degrees of financial pressure. So, and of course, procurement is not going to be completely unaffected in that sense either. So how can suppliers not just innovate, but demonstrate the value of it just in terms of cost, but in delivering better outcomes and long-term efficiency against that backdrop that I just described there? Yes.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Christian. I think, as we all know, the public sector landscape and the pressure that local authorities, combined authorities, are up against at the moment is really, really challenging. We know that budgets are really strained, resources really tied up in a lot of areas. So actually, it's a bit of a which one comes first. We're under this significant pressure as a public sector as a whole, but then also we need kind of these innovative approaches and solutions to fix some of those problems that we're inherently facing. So it's which one goes first. I think from a supplier's point of view, you really want to be thinking around the total life cycle offering that you can bring, not just around upfront savings, but actually continued improvement, softer side value benefits as well that might not intrinsically be linked to a cost or a score matrix or something like that. When we're looking at the quality of benefits for citizens, improved outcomes, could be enhanced performance for teams, depending on what kind of solutions you're looking at. And also just thinking of those longer term goals as well, and kind of where the needle's going in the long run. And I think from a buyer's perspective, you need to be open to understand that something might seem more challenging or difficult up front and possibly more expensive, but in the long run that actually might retrieve much better outcomes for you as an authority, solve bigger problems, and then you might get some of those additional benefits that sit alongside that. And just be open and open around what can be done around value and additional value. And I think that's one of the key things which suppliers are really demonstrating more and more, especially when we think of social value and ESG, but also thinking more broadly around what that innovation could bring in the long term as well. And being open to try, as Rikesh said, try some things, test, start small, and then look to scale up. And I think that's probably one of the risk mitigation factors is, you don't need to go all in at first. You can try things and run these pilots and use, flexible contracting models that we should have under the new regulations under PA 23 to really try and test new things in a different way, and really use that to your advantage.
Absolutely. Thank you. Sorry, Rikesh.
I agree with Michael. And I think this point on value is really important. Like sometimes I think reducing costs and doing things better can coexist. It's not a binary, trade-off. And the other thing I would say is let's look at it from the lens of, we've touched on the supplier, we've touched on the buyer, but also the citizen. And what do our citizens want? And what our citizens want is they want safer, greener, more livable places. They want a better environment. They want a better standard of life. And I think sometimes we spend, and rightfully so, we spend lots of time looking at the balance sheets. So how much are we spending and how much money do we have? And the citizen cares about that because they're paying for it in some shape or form. But they also want to know about what value is being created. And is the council pushing hard enough to try new things with the right safeguards in place? So I genuinely believe that, innovation in this case isn't a nice to have. Our citizens are expecting it to say, I want better value. And if other authorities are doing it, they'll be looking at us at a local level and saying, why aren't we doing it? So we've got to create the right environment to be more human-centric and think about the end user at all times, because that's who we're here to serve.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. No, really important points. So thank you. Just a couple of sort of questions remaining, but I think just while we talk about suppliers for a moment, from your experience, what does a truly innovative supplier, do you think, look like in practice? And what are some of the sort of characteristics that you think would set those kind of suppliers apart in the eyes of, the public buyers and the purchasing authorities?
Do you want to take this one, Rikesh?
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing is, for me, innovation is a philosophy, it's a mindset. So it could be anything. It could be a product, it could be a piece of tech, it could be a process, it could be the types of people you have. So a lot of it is around, it could be physical, it doesn't have to be. So I think that's number one. I think the second thing I would advise suppliers and the buyer side is there's too much hype out there. Right now, I'm seeing slide packs that have the word AI written on the end of it. And we've had big data, we've had smart cities, and we've lots of other things. Just be honest and say, what is the problem that you're solving and how does my technology help? The buyer may care about it, but sometimes, quite often, they won't, because they just want value. And I think the innovation side, just going back to the earlier point, there's lots of coats that we wear. We flex quite regularly depending on the problem that we're trying to solve. But fundamentally, it is about what are those key challenges that I'm facing at a local level that my CEO cares about, that my citizen cares about, that my politicians care about, and how can I find new ways to address that challenge, ultimately doing it better, cheaper, quicker, safer, right? And that's, for me, is what innovation is. You're doing it in a new way.
Completely.
Absolutely.
Did you have anything to add, Michael?
Yeah, really, really interesting points. And I think touching on what Rikesh said there, just around, think of the problem that you're trying to solve and fix and actually work with the authorities on that basis, because we've all seen examples where the problem definition or hasn't been approached in the right way with the market, and does the buyer know the problem that they're actually trying to solve as well, and can that really be defined? I think finding that out, and then not just positioning as Rikesh said, you're off the shelf product or service into that offering there, but actually designing something that could be bespoke to really fix a niche problem. And that's the different way of looking at it and thinking about it, is we're really trying to define the problem and fix that particular thing, not just with what's been necessarily done elsewhere, although that is great when we can bring new solutions into different areas. But yeah, I would say a supplier that's open to conversation and dialogue, as well as a buyer. Solutions focused, outcomes focused, using the contracting type models that you have to really work together in a collaborative sense, and just being able to balance not only compliance from a procurement point of view, but bringing that credibility and that trust. And I think that's where the relationship side really comes in as well, because you want confidence in who you're working with and partnering with potentially, and I think relationships are really key to that, and balancing off that kind of risk and compliance kind of aspect of procurement and public procurement. But really bringing forward some new solutions and new thinking into a new space is always a good thing.
Absolutely. Thank you both very much for that. And a final question from me. So just looking back to the Local Government Procurement Expo from last week, and thank you very much to both of you for speaking at that. In addition to your session, what are some of the other sort of key messages and themes that you and your organizations are looking to get across at that event and to the, local government procurement community more widely?
Yeah, sure. So 2 or 3 things that I heard. I think the first one is the role of commercial and procurement at the top table. It's a strategic function. It can't just be a support function to finance, because the biggest spender in an organization is a procurement team. I think the other area that came out quite strongly is that public-private engagement. The public sector, with its £400 billion that it's spending every year, recognizes that the rate of technological change is significant. That means our commercial folk and other folk need to be at the forefront, i.e. be the intelligent client of what does AI mean for us, both as a process, but also bringing new solutions in to our organizations and make local authorities better.
Brilliant, thank you. And Michael?
Yeah, really, really good points, Rikesh. And I think probably one of the key takeaways from me being, a commercial, as I say, in a commercial role in a procurement organization, is with some of the changes that are happening and in that mindset shift, we can really enable some of this innovative thinking with the private sector and working more collaboratively, more cohesively, whether it's through that early engagement, but then also just having a more open door policy to seeing what's out there and what we can achieve. And procurement, as Rikesh pointed out, really needs to be at that top table, because it is going to be a strategic driver for change and place-based growth and all these new areas that can be delivered. But procurement can't be the last to know. You can't just engage them late on and expect to get brilliant results. So I think early engagement with the right teams, with the procurement teams, and ensuring that they are at that top table, as Rikesh said, would be one of my key takeaways.
Of course, and I think it's a similar message that we'll be keen to get across at Tracker and at BIP and indeed at all our events as well. So no, it's absolutely important. So thank you very much. Rikesh and Michael, it has been a pleasure. So thank you very much for joining me today here and for speaking at the event, as we just alluded to last week. And hopefully we'll be hearing from you again very soon.
Thanks, both.
Christian.
Perfect, thank you. And now, as promised, I'll be handing you over to Dawn McTaggart, who will be taking a closer look at the latest trends and developments in the local government market and explain how Tracker can help you make data-driven decisions to excel in this sector.
Thanks so much, Christian, and obviously to our guest speakers, Michael and Rikesh. Very insightful information. So now I'd like to take you on to the Tracker service and give you a high-level overview of the platform that we offer. Tracker was the first service that we set up back in the late 90s to support suppliers. It's very much seeing the world of procurement through suppliers' eyes, because we find that most of the tendering portals in the market are very buyer-centric. They're more from a supplier's perspective, a means to allow you to express interest and submit bids rather than alerting you to new opportunities. The other biggest challenge that suppliers face in the public sector is the sheer volume of tendering sites that are out there. Across the UK, there are hundreds, if you work globally there are thousands. So trying to track the market is a hugely time-consuming exercise and runs the risk of missing opportunity. So the first iteration of Tracker was more of an aggregator, and to remain this day the most comprehensive database there is in the market. What we've done over the years, though, is modelled the system based on the feedback from our customers, and that's largely based on challenges that suppliers face. There's been a lot of talk on today's webinar about the importance of engaging early, and we know that that's becoming more and more important. The companies that we work with that are most successful and most heavily invested are all engaging as early as possible. So we've developed the system over the years to allow suppliers to take on a far more proactive approach and start looking at contracts that will be coming up for renewal in the short, medium and long term. Also giving you information on who to engage with and a lot of competitor analysis as well. So it's more of a business intelligence tool rather than just being alerting you to tendering opportunities, but designed to ensure that you're giving yourself the absolute best chance of winning work when you do bid. So without further ado, I will share my screen with you and take you on to the platform. So Tracker, as I say, is a system very much designed from a supplier's perspective. It will give you full visibility of everything in the public domain. The contract search is very intuitive. You can run a search on anything at all in the public sector. With us, you don't buy into a specific data set. If it's in the public domain, you'll see it. So you could run a search on a competitor or an authority or whatever it may be. You can also have unlimited profiles, but we want to ensure that this is as low labour intensive as possible. So for the purpose of today's call, I've based this around the IT sector. I've built a profile on digital transformation. What I would stress, if you're not in that sector and you are interested in a more in-depth discussion on how we could support your business, just put that in the chat and either myself or one of my colleagues will get in touch. What I've based this profile around is mainly keywords and phrases and the acronyms. There is the option to use CPV codes. I've chosen not to on this occasion because the IT sector has, the CPV codes have not been updated for nearly 20 years. So in IT, the world has changed hugely. So rather than rely solely on CPV codes, as a lot of portals do, we focus it mainly on the keywords because you can be as refined as you wish to be. But the option is there to include your CPV codes. In the background, though, supporting our research team, which is obviously a very large team tracking thousands of sites globally, they're supported by a data science team. And our data scientists have implemented a lot of AI and machine learning into the platform. And that's something we will continue to develop. It's a roadmap of continuous development. So it means that the system will learn from your behaviour, really intuitive in the background, and start prompting you, these are the contracts that should be top of your radar. So we've got a recommender system that's been loaded, and that basically just takes all of your contracts that match your profile, identifies from your company profile, from previous submissions, what is the most likely going to be the sweet spot, so to speak, and alerts you to that. So it's making sure you're spending your time and resource on things that will be most fruitful for you. For the purpose of today, I've based this over the last 12 months, but to allow for the early engagement discussions, we offer 5 years archives. And the reason for 5 years is most tenders run in 3 and 4 year cycles. So if we can give you line of sight of everything that's happened over the last 5 years, then that's your pipeline of work for the next 5. So if we run a search on this, the reactive part of Tracker is you'll get an email every morning with any contracts that match your profile. So if you see a contract that's of interest, just click on the contract here. View the full contract. It will give you all the information. If there is a named contact, it's invariably someone within the procurement team. More and more, we're seeing generic procurement at or tenders at email addresses. So that's why we've added a database of decision maker contacts, which I'll share with you shortly. But all the information you would expect to see, and then irrespective of where this is published, if we scroll down to the bottom, we'll provide you the link to take you directly through to express your interest and submit your bid. So the beauty of Tracker is it negates the need for you to register on any other site for sourcing purposes, puts it all in one place and gives you that peace of mind you won't miss an opportunity. You can even share the content, set reminders for future pipeline and shortlist the contract as well. There are a number of other filters, again, just to ensure relevancy. You can filter by industry sector, so if there's a specific sector that you've had most success in. Geographically, we do cover global, European access or just UK. And if you work in the UK and you're regionalised, you can even filter by specific regions. Another feature that we've added is the stage of the procurement. And this was really in line with the Procurement Act 23. There's increased visibility for authorities to be a lot more transparent about their pipeline. Our senior consultant was part of the consultation process with Cabinet Office over the new regulations, as we've got a training and consultancy division as well. So because we were very much at the table, we've been able to track all of this pre-early engagement. So the pipeline notices are when an authority publishes its planned procurement for the new financial year, normally where contracts exceed 2 million. And there's also a big push for market and engagement days. So authorities are actually publishing the fact that they want to engage with the supply chain. So having visibility of everything that's going to be happening over the next year gives you that opportunity to really take on that first mover advantage and ensure that you're getting ahead of the game. But we've been an advocate of early engagement for a long time, long before the Procurement Act came out this year. So one way we've done that is through the awarded contracts. The beauty of looking at awarded contracts, don't think of this as missed opportunity. If it's recurring work, this is your pipeline of work for the future. You can see from this graph how lucrative the IT sector is, but there are £400 billion being spent across all sectors in the UK. So it's a hugely lucrative market to get into. What the notices and awards will show you, though, is the notices is your contracts when they go live. The awards are pipeline work for the future. So you can see the detail of the contract, who the buyer is, who the supplier is, so who the incumbent is, the value of the contract. So very quickly, you get really good line of sight of what your competitors are doing. But most importantly as well, you can see from this isn't up for renewal until November 2030. So it's a long-term contract. Maybe too early to be engaging now. You might decide, right, let's start the engagement process 12 months out. Choose the date you want to start that engagement. That will automatically populate a reminder onto your dashboard, and it also integrates into your email. So it means that you can seamlessly streamline your pipeline of work. You can even filter this by end date and then export all of the data. So very simple and easy to use, and you can have multiple profiles saved at all times. We've also added a frameworks module, and the reason for this is because of the importance that frameworks are taking on in the market. We find through our own research only about 20% of contracts are procured through frameworks, but it equates to about 67% of the overall public sector spend. So getting on frameworks is hugely lucrative for businesses. So rather than just giving you the framework detail when it's out, when it's up for renewal, we've manually mapped through the data science team over 11,000 frameworks from over 4,000 buyers. And what we're doing with this is ensuring that everything is mapped together. You're not having to spend a lot of time and resource going through spreadsheets or PDFs. And you can even filter this to whatever it is that you want to be speaking about. If you wanted to put in, say, digital, for example, and run that search, you'll get all the frameworks where digital is named, and you can even look at a specific framework. So again, if I just put in digital here and choose one of the digital frameworks, what you've got here is all of the detail. So the framework itself, all the notices, all of the contract awards, most importantly, who are the buyers that are procuring through this framework. So if you were successful in getting awarded onto this framework and one of these, on this occasion, NHS trusts, is about to go to tender, you could actually approach them and say, well, we're on this framework, and that could actually reduce the need to even go through a tender process because they could directly award you. What you can also do from this is look at the suppliers. So again, you can see all the suppliers who are on the contract and how many awards they've been awarded. So it gives you a really good insight into what frameworks to be targeting, which ones will be most lucrative, so you can have a much more robust bid no bid process. So that's the contract opportunity. A lot of additional features within Tracker though. What we also have included here is a decision maker contact database. The main reason for this is our customers were feeding back to us, look, it's great to know when contracts are up for renewal, but so often we're seeing, as in this occasion, a generic email address, or if there is a named contact, it's invariably not going to be someone within a decision-making role. It's normally someone within procurement admin running the submission stage. So we've got a database of around about 80,000 direct decision-maker contacts. What you can do is type in any authority here and then choose the job role. So if you want to go at very high level C-suite, or obviously we're looking at digital, you've got all your digital contacts. So named individuals, phone numbers, direct email addresses. These are the people to be reaching out to. So marry this up with the contract end dates, and you've got a database of when the contracts are up, who the incumbent is, and who the chief people are to be engaging with. We've also discussed quite a lot about net zero and social value. very much growing themes. The authorities are very much being encouraged to move away from that price-driven decision-making and looking at things like sustainability and social value. So more and more we're finding authorities are actually recruiting sustainability managers, strategists. These are the people who will ultimately decide how contracts are weighted. So again, if you're involved in that early consultation process, it gives you the opportunity to not just influence the contract, but actually influence how it's weighted. So you could increase your win rate and your margins. But then there are a lot of other features. The market insights gives you a high level overview of industry sectors. So we've chosen the top 24 industry sectors that are spending in the public sector. If you want to choose any one of these, what this shows you is the volume of notices and awards, how many buyers are active, and then it shows you all the authorities that are most active. So if you are setting up and doing horizon scanning, planning your year ahead, planning your 3-year plan, whatever that may be, you can see who are the key players so that you can know who to be targeting. And you can even filter that by banding. So if you've got a specific sweet spot of say 5 to 10 million, this gives you the opportunity to say, well, who's actually spending within our sector. If you click on any one of these, what you can also see is all the suppliers that they're engaged with. So hugely powerful information, but a bit of a high level overview so that you can scope out the market. We then take that one step further and going into the spend analysis tool. Now this actually tracks transactional invoicing. The reason we're doing this is you can look at a buyer or a supplier. So if we use Softcat as an example, often the values attached to a contract are a bit of a forecast, what the authorities anticipate they'll spend rather than being the actual spend. Public sector in the UK now have got to publish who they're working with and how much they're spending. So we track and aggregate that information together. But rather than just giving you raw data to analyse yourself, we've done all of that analysis in the background. So what we've done, you can see in this example, Softcat have invoiced over 440 million in the last 12 months. That can be filtered back as well. We then marry it up with the contract awards. So very quickly you can see what contracts that spend relates to, even down to how long is left running on that contract, so you can set reminders as well. So hugely insightful information here. But then going back to the spend data, what this gives you is a bit of an average over a 5-year period, so you can see if their income is increasing or decreasing. But most importantly and most powerfully, from my opinion, here are the authorities that they're working with. So you can see not only who they're invoicing, how much they're invoicing, how frequently they're invoicing. You can even drill it down to individual transactional amounts. What we've also added here is a business relationship score, or BRS as it's abbreviated to. What that does is through our analysis, this is based on a combination of the longevity of the relationship and the volume and value of contract awards. This shows you how strong those relationships are. So if you wanted to go in and try and disrupt a competitor's relationship with authorities, you might say, well, they've got a much stronger relationship with this NHS trust than with this one, so perhaps we've got a better chance of winning the work from that. And again, it just allows for a far more robust bid-no-bid process. So those are the key features. There are other parts to the system, but those are the key headlines. As I mentioned, though, this is a very agile platform. We're continually upgrading it. We've got a roadmap of development through the product team. So taking you on to the next feature that is due to go live. Now, this is due to go live this week, in fact, so it's very new. It's the latest iteration, latest addition. So what we can do here is looking at the contract search. So I'll just type in NEPO as an example to keep it relevant for today's call. This shows you all the NEPO contracts. And if we choose just one of these, the AI is working away in the background here. And what this is doing is it's generating a clear and structured summary of contracts. So we're taking all the highlights of the contract. We're going through the full contract entry and looking at the highlighted information, the timelines, the key deliverables. So using our AI platform, you've got an overview. So giving you those insights you need to make informed business decisions in minutes. So rather than you reading through 4 or 5 pages of a contract just to identify this is not the right fit, all the key points are illustrated here through the AI. And this is something that we will continue to develop. So it's very fast paced, growing all the time, but you've got your contact details, the duration of the contract, the value, and the key parts to that. So again, this is all designed to save you time, save you resource, and ensure that you're investing your time in the most fruitful exercise, doing all the analysis in the background, ensuring that you're giving yourself your best chance of winning. So we go back to the dashboard. This is just visualized, so it gives you information on the market. You can set reminders well into the future so you can plan that pipeline of work. So as we're in December now, coming towards the end of the calendar year, we do find that there is quite a big increase in activity in public sector, and those of you in bid teams I'm sure will agree with that. As private sector try and wind down for the Christmas period, the public sector do the opposite. They want to get their awards out before the new financial year and new budgets being allocated. So for that reason, anyone that's interested in coming on board with Tracker in the month of December, we're offering a Christmas special of 14 months for the price of 12. So that will give you all of December and January to really bed this into the business moving forward, make sure that you're hitting the ground running in 2026 and making it a successful year for everyone. But I thank you very much for your time. And as I say, if anyone would like more information on how this could support your business strategy in the public sector, please do put that in the chat and we'll be more than happy to support you moving forward. But thanks a lot for your time, everyone. Bye-bye.